Realtor family, it's good to be with each and every one of you right now as we discuss living and working in the now and leading through our crisis that we've gone through and continue to go through. We have a tremendous group with us today, and it's time for us to go ahead and get started. But we also have our PAG members, who I won't introduce, that have joined us, as well as our CEO, Steve Stevens. The first person that I will introduce will be Vince Tyra. He's a Louisville native, strong leadership and business credentials. He was named as the University of Louisville's Vice President of Intercollegiate Athletics and Director of Athletics in 2018. Now, prior to his appointment, he served as an operating partner for Southfield Capital in Greenwich, Connecticut, a private equity firm that invests in lower middle market companies. He's also served as chairman of the board and interim CEO of Elite Medical, and was a corporate advisor from 2008 through 2017 for ISCO in Louisville. And he was formerly the president of retail and activewear for Fruit of the Loom out of Bowling Green. So we're excited to have him joining us today for sure. Next, I'll introduce Tyler Gossett. Tyler's an area sales manager with Fifth Third Bank. He's based out of Lexington, and Mr. Gossett has a long history of working in the financial services industry. He's a skilled residential lender. He's strong in banking, sales, credit analysis, and credit. So thank you so much for being with us, Tyler. Next, I'll introduce Cora Henderson, and she's a partner. Many of us know her if you've worked in the Louisville area at Pitt Frank, which handles both commercial and residential real estate closings, planning and zoning matters, contract disputes, 1031 transactions, wills, trust, and much more. She received her law degree in 2005 from the University of Louisville Brandeis School of Law, and Cora has practiced in the Commonwealth of Kentucky since 2005. She's a board member of the Mortgage Bankers of Louisville, Greater Louisville Association of Realtors faculty member, and the 2019 recipient of the Nat Sanders Educator of the Year Award. So thank you for your service, Cora. And then next, I will introduce Lisa Stephenson. Lisa is a certified public accountant and CEO of the Greater Louisville Association of Realtors. Now, she's served the association for 23 years and oversees GLAR staff of 16, and GLAR currently has over 5,000 realtor members that Lisa and her staff support on a day-to-day basis. Thank you so much for all you do, Lisa. And then rounding out our panel today, John May, certified real estate appraiser in Kentucky, and John performs residential appraisers primarily in the Metro Louisville market area. He holds the prestigious SRA designation from the Appraisal Institute, the nation's leading authority on appraisal education professionalism. He's a realtor member for the Greater Louisville Association of Realtors and has served both as president of GLAR and the Kentucky Association of Realtors. Mr. May served as the property valuation administrator for Jefferson County, and he served multiple terms as an appraiser member of the Jefferson County Board of Assessment and Appeals. And so as I said, introductions, I now turn it over to our moderator, Lamont Breland, and Lamont is a past president of KYR and a NAR director as well. Lamont.
Thank you, Lester. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for your leadership during this strange time that we're in. Welcome, Realtor family. Thank you all for being with us today. I do want to remind you all that of all the resources that are available on KYR's website. So if you go to kyrrealtor.com and click on the COVID-19 page, that is updated probably daily with different types of resources that you can use. So let's get started. First of all, I'm not sure, Vince, are you on the call yet? Vince Tyra? Okay, so Vince may not be on the call yet. So what we're going to do is just move on forward with our real estate portion. And let's talk about everybody's favorite subject, and that's closings, right? So Cora Henderson, thank you for being with us today. How are things going over at Pitt and Frank, and what kind of changes are you seeing in the closing protocols?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I can tell you that as it relates to our industry, business is good, which is surprising if you watch the news and you look at unemployment, but interest rates are low. And on any given day, we see about 50-50 as it relates to purchases and refinances. So it's not just folks refinancing, the purchase market is still relatively strong. Just a couple comments on the look and the feel of closings in this environment. For us, the theme has been accommodation. So we want to respect our clients' needs, their personal preferences, their comfort levels, and their health concerns. While most closings are still being conducted in a traditional and professional office setting, we wear masks and gloves. The rooms are sanitized each and every time. Only the required signers are allowed in the office. Each closing table is at least 10 feet long, so social distancing is easily accomplished. Buyers and sellers they sit at separate times just to ensure that social distancing as well. There's no waiting in the lobby that's allowed. And we're fortunate enough that our office is conducive for that type of environment. Our conference room's located at the front of the office space so that the office staff can be removed from that situation and removed from that general public and closing traffic. We also offer curbside closings where the signers remain in their vehicles during their closing, and many of our competitors, both nationally and locally, are also doing the same. Under the emergency order and when it meets certain underwriting and lending guidelines, Zoom and other audio-video platforms may be utilized in the office or out of the office using a traditional notary. Now, in addition, I have obtained my e-notary with the state of Kentucky. We are approved with Notarize and Pavaso, both of which are national RON platforms. RON stands for Remote Online Notarization. So this is yet another accommodation that can be made for buyers and sellers, an opportunity for both full e-closings as well as hybrid closings where the signer never has to leave their home. Now, RON closings has always been a technology that's been on the forefront. It's something that the law has allowed for as of January 1. However, this pandemic has certainly sped up a lot of this technology. We do think that post-pandemic, this technology will still exist and it'll only continue. We can see that as well as it relates to e-recording through the clerk's offices. That also began January 1. So for those folks that were fortunate enough to have already done that pre-pandemic, you're in pretty strong position during the pandemic as well to be able to continue to e-record when some of the clerk's offices are closed to the public. So that's just kind of a little introduction as to what the closings look like, and I look forward to answering any questions that the audience may have for us.
That's good. So what about, we had one client who had a property, Rough River, and I think it was Breckenridge County or something like that, and the courthouse or the clerk's office was closed. Anything that can be done for something like that?
Sure. So that is going to be on a case-by-case basis. But if the clerk's office is closed and they do not have an online platform to search the records, for instance, Jefferson County, you can go back to a significant number of years to be able to search the records, 1984, if you will. So there's still an opportunity, depending on how long the seller has owned the property, to complete a search that would be sufficient to bring that closing to fruition. But if, in fact, the seller owned it pre the time that the documents were available online, or if it was a county in which you mentioned the lake, the area there did not have online records, of course, we would have to talk to the underwriters on what, if anything, they would be willing to use in order to underwrite a real estate transaction. So if the seller had their deed copy, had an owner's title insurance policy, had their payoff from their mortgage, evidence like that would be used on a case-by-case basis to see if, in fact, we could close on that. The few transactions that we've had at our office that met that criteria, we were able to use what the seller had provided us in order to get it closed effectively and get a good owner's policy.
Got it. Okay, good. Thanks, Cora. So we can't get to closing without money. And so Tyler Gossett with Fifth Third, what are some of the major changes you've seen in lending over the last, say, 60 days or so?
Yeah, thanks for having me as well. Well, this has been a very fluid time in our world of mortgage. But I will say that our industry has, I think, done a great job, as well as your all's industry in working around what we need to keep business going. So some of the first hurdles that we saw when this came out was getting into homes. People were cautious to have appraisers in their house, doing inspections, that kind of thing. And that was something that we got worked through with the agencies, Freddie and Fannie, pretty quickly to come up with some alternatives. So for our purchase loans, which you all will be dealing with mostly, most of those we can do an exterior only, or what's called a desktop appraisal. I'll let John speak a little bit more about that, but that was a great addition to our industry to be able to keep things going. The credit guidelines have definitely across the board tightened up a little bit, with some concerns about the amount of unemployment that's out there. And then we had several clients that were currently furloughed. So I want to go in to kind of dig into the credit guidelines a little bit, and stop me if you all have heard this stuff before. I know you've had a few of these calls, but the first thing that we saw in our industry as far as tightening were our government guidelines, for a couple of reasons. They're higher loan to value. That's the first thing. So, when you go to do a loan, if you can get your collateral right, and you can make sure that you're protecting your loan by the collateral, that cures a lot of woes. So these higher loan to value loans, they were tightened up a little bit. So with the government loans, you're not going to lower the loan to value guidelines, but what they're going to do is increase the minimum credit scores. You're seeing the agency, or Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac also kind of doing that as well. But what they're doing is increasing the credit score minimum guidelines, and also debt to income ratios are being a little bit tighter. With the with the furloughed borrowers, we are having to make sure that we verify that their employment is still active. So, which is a little bit more difficult with a lot of places going to remote only. So we've always had to do verification of employment prior to closing verbal, just to make sure that everybody's still employed. But what we were able to institute on our conventional loans is if we can't get a hold of somebody for a verbal verification of employment, we can take a pay stub, a recent pay stub, within 15 days. So that was a big win for us as well, to try to move those along. For people who are actually furloughed, we cannot close a loan at our place without verification that they've started back to work. The agencies actually have given guidance that if the bank or lending institution wants to take that risk on and hold that loan in their portfolio, they'll allow us to go ahead and close that, but we have to go back and verify that that borrower is back to work before we can sell that loan off to the agencies. So that's a pretty big risk if you think about it, for the bank or lending institution to take. I'm not aware of anybody who's decided that they want to take that risk for obvious reasons, but you may find somebody out there who's willing to do that.
So as an agent, I've got my buyer pre-qualified, got a pre-approval letter. How strong is that now, would you say? Does that need to be updated every other day, or how powerful is that? Especially if I have a listing and I have multiple offers, how do I weigh that from a banking perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would definitely reach out to your banker, lending institution, if you have a pre-qualification that is a little bit aged. So if it's 3 or 4 weeks old, if you're getting ready to make an offer, a quick call would be probably worth it before you put that in. I don't think every day or every week is necessary. It's going to depend on the institution, but we usually have a pretty good lead time when we change these guidelines. So we haven't tightened tremendously. Most of ours have been around the government space, increasing some credit score stuff. But, you know, we had a list of all those pre-qualification letters that were issued, and we reached out to all of those clients to let them know, hey, this is going to be changing within the next 2 weeks. You may want to go ahead and get that house under contract now, or you won't qualify. So hopefully your lenders are reaching out to those borrowers proactively, but I would definitely, if you have one that's been aged, especially if it's a government loan, take a look at that, or a high interest rate, higher loan to value loan. So for instance, we do a doctor loan program, which is 100% loan to value loan. And so it's for physicians. We have continued that product, but we've had to tighten the guidelines a little bit on credit score as well. So.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you, Tyler. Let me check real quick, see if Vince is on yet. Vince Tyra, you been able to jump on yet? If not, I'm going to switch over. Tyler mentioned appraisals. So John May, what are you seeing in appraisals, and how are things going in your world?
Thank you, Lamont. Thank you, Lester. Yes, we continue to see exterior appraisals being ordered, and that seems to be the majority, unless the property is vacant, or unless, I'll tell you where a seller is penalized, I think, is if they have a very nice house and it can't be fully appreciated from the street. I think it becomes a little bit of a problem, especially right now when they're pushing the envelope on values. So I think, the exterior appraisal works, but if I had a super nice property, I might make I might go through the process and let the guys come in and take a look at the property to see how nice the features are. Or a guy that we sort of had, discussion with last week was about his finished basement. But I wanted to offer 3 things today. I threw up 3 slides here. They're not going to be in depth, anything like that. But I did get yesterday, Fannie Mae released their quarterly, which is not that one, but there you go. Fannie Mae released their quarterly or their monthly report yesterday. And I think it's important for me just to read over a few of these highlights, and we can kind of compare those to where we're at. But this basically, the first highlighted section I put on here, a partial recovery is forecast for the second half of the year due to supportive monetary and fiscal policies, and resume consumer spending following elevated savings and expected relaxation of virus-related restrictions. So they're really counting on those as components of their supporting the second half increase. But the next sentence is also very, I think, informative for us. It says, the risk to the downside includes that the recovery takes longer than expected due to a second wave, but the uptick is that we have this rapid rate of recovery. And I believe in the news, you hear both competing sides. You hear we're going to get the second wave and that's going to crush us. And then you have the folks that say we're going to have a rapid recovery. So both of those are both factors in Fannie's forecast. My next paragraph says 2020 existing home sales to decline approximately 15%, a figure that's largely been unchanged from last month, as home buying activity is showing signs of stabilization, including recent uptick in mortgage applications and sales listings. And so in our chart, we're going to show that in the MLS in Louisville, we were down about 12% just compared with this time last year. This chart right here shows the inventory is the green line, the average sales price is the bar chart, and closings is the wavy snaky blue line. And you can see that April of 2020 was the weakest month for closings compared with the last 3 years. And from the chart, you can see that, April has always outpaced March. This April, which we do have the data because we're in the middle of May. So this April, you can see that we lost ground. And in our data from Louisville, which I didn't study the entire area, it tells me what areas I did. Part of our MLS is Indiana and some really outlying counties, and I didn't put those in there. but this is for residential. And you can see in April, we lost ground, but what's not losing ground is the average sales price. So from an appraisal perspective, the values are not tanking, and we have to convey to our clients what is the health of the market. You know, supply is down and prices are up. And I believe, you know, that's going to be, we're going to get in these competitive scenarios, which I've talked to a couple of agents over the past few days, and they're back to this multiple offers, and in some cases 6. And Lamont told me he had an agent that had more than 6 offers on a property in the rain. So you can see that the prices, we would be really nervous if prices were dropping and inventory was dropping and closings were dropping and everything was dropping, you know, but prices are staying strong. And Paul, I had one more, I have another slide from the Fannie Mae part that had a couple of quotes that might be helpful. Go back, is that yeah, go to the next page. Okay, this is right here at the top. It says anecdotal evidence that sellers are reluctant to cut prices and are opting instead to take their homes off the market for fear of the contagion. I have not seen any of that, but the guys that are on the ground, they could speak more to that than I could, but I haven't seen, when I studied the properties that were being withdrawn and canceled, and I didn't see anything out of the ordinary on that. So that one is not necessarily a concern. So the middle paragraph, the chief economist for Fannie Mae, who has access to a lot more data than I do, says, quote, "The timing and pace of the recovery remains in many ways unknown, as it depends on the dissipation or treatment of the disease and the reaction of the public to the duration and severity." Okay, here's the key for us. Most forecasts are more accurately characterized as scenarios. So, you know, nobody really knows, but they're following some different scenarios. The last one here, he says, "We expect housing to stage a solid recovery starting later in the year, but they still predict a 15% decline." Well, obviously, we are seeing that. As I said, we had about a 12% decline already. So I have my final chart is my daily tracking of what's going on in the Louisville market. I don't include the weekends because the weekends skew the data, but my daily chart, and this goes back to February the 20th, the daily tracking poll, I call it. And you can see that on the GLAR data that I had, we were on a absolute stellar path in early March. And then on March the 7th, when they issued the state of emergency, you know, we sort of kept it going, but we have not reached the high point on March the 7th as far as new listings. I think you can see that the closings remain about the same as we heard from Cora. And, you know, I think a lot of that is because of the lag time. I think that what we're going to see maybe in 30 or 45 days might also be very influential. The pendings, which is also a number that we follow, the pendings, which if we had all these new listings and we didn't have any pendings, we would be a little concerned. But you can also see that the pendings are staying relatively competitive with where they were in the first quarter. But from this chart, I think you can just see we were off on a, you know, we were on a trajectory that just got quashed, but we have not seen these charts where we're down to zero. So this is a, you know, we're holding on to what most people would probably say is stable. And, you know, the rebound is going to come back through there. I hope following some of these, you know, some of these predictions from Fannie, but from what I'm seeing, our sales are down about 12% from April of last year, and our inventory is down about 17% from April of last year. So both of those things set themselves up for, I guess, Lamont, competitive offers, multiple folks fighting out. And also then that means that they're going to be pushing the values on their appraisals, because the guy we had, you know, an example the other day, most of the houses were about 240 and he put it up for 250 and sold it in one day. So, you know, you're pushing the envelope, but there's all this demand because the supply is down. So, you know, in a nutshell, that's kind of what we're seeing. We try to do our best to convey to our clients what's the impact of the crisis. And You know, we like to be a little ahead of the curve as we predict than behind. And one thing to just close out, when we were doing a relocation the other day, and relocation appraisals, they want you to forecast out the next 90 days what's going to happen with that particular property. Well, if it's nearly impossible, as all of these experts have said, for anybody to predict what's going to happen in 90 days. And when their chief appraiser sent me a note back, he said, well, we have guys using this, using a sentence. They really can't measure how bad they think it's going to get, but they're still taking a negative view. Well, that doesn't take, you know, that doesn't help out a transferee on a relocation property if they don't know. But anyway, I think that predicting out 90 days is extraordinarily difficult. No matter how much data I have, I follow it every day, and I've not seen a tank. So, you know, we just have to go with stable, plugging along.
Yep. Good. All right. Well, thanks, John. So Lisa Stephenson, you're the CEO of the Greater Louisville Association of Realtors with 5,000 members. What are you hearing from your position from your members? Anything to share there?
Yeah, I mean, I can just say I've been so impressed with how well our members and our staff and everyone have adjusted to the new way of doing business. You know, everything from showings and virtual showings and the way they've conducted themselves, you know, things seem to be moving fairly smoothly. You know, I'll reiterate what John said about the sales numbers in our market area, because, you know, we just finished our April numbers. And I'm looking at our entire MLS, where I know John's narrowed it down a little bit, and we're down 10% for the month of April overall. But the prices are, you know, still very strong. And he talked about the market being booming before this happened. And looking at our year-to-date numbers, he's 100% on track with that, because we're only down 0.7% for this first 4 months as we were to the same time period last year. So this has really put a slowdown on, you know, what otherwise would have been an amazing, amazing spring.
Right.
Definitely hearing a lot of conversations about our agents with multiple offer situations. A lot of people taking advantage of off-market properties. You know, I'm hearing agents that are having conversations about, you know, reaching out to people that did not have their houses on the market and getting more of those deals done than ever before.
Mm-hmm. Good. So are you finding that your membership, I know as we go to showings and things like that, the optics are a little bit different. People are doing it different ways. Some people have a basket or a little table out with all the gloves and all that type of thing. And then others, I've heard that they don't want to maybe take that leap or that liability, but they ensure maybe they're out in their car watching to make sure everybody has PPE. So I think we're learning as we go, and I think we're definitely getting better. Are you all offering any products or things for your members?
Absolutely. We have a retail store, and our hot products these days, no surprises, are masks and shoe covers. I mean, we're selling those like crazy. Forget the open house signs. We have a new, new featured products.
Yeah, the open house, I think that's going to go the way of the telephone, the old rotary dial. But okay, thanks, Lisa. So Cora, let me ask you a question. You know, as a broker, I feel like maybe I'm just super sensitive to it, but I feel like I'm signing a lot of authenticsigns for releases on contracts. I never necessarily know what the details are unless somebody gets angry and calls you or an attorney. Are you getting more calls from agents that are frustrated because folks are not able to go follow through on their contracts?
Surprisingly, no. Certainly, we've had some questions, especially as the COVID addendum became widely used throughout the state and distributed. So I had a little bit of questions on how and when to use that, what it looks like, but haven't had any questions as it relates to struggling through the release process. I think most people, when they are under contract, want to reside in that position in good faith and work to get that accomplished. I will say the only tough thing we've had to work through is a couple of dominoes as it relates to to a very large employer here locally. They furloughed a lot of their workers. And so until those workers went back to work, they were unable to receive their lending and get that clear to close. So that was an instance where you're asking multiple transactions to hang in there just to work with one particular buyer. But that was all accomplished again because everyone truly wanted to buy and sell. So they stuck around into that position. So not an unusual number of calls in that regard, which is a good sign because files are actually closing rather than canceling.
Good, good. All right, I'm going to check real quick to see if Vince has come on. Vince, are you with us yet? If not, I'm going to transition over. This is maybe going to go to two of you. It's going to go to my buddy John May, and then I'm going to ask Tyler. Maybe you can both answer this question. One of our questions over here is, how will appraisal values match up to the current demand that's pushing prices up? So I guess I would ask Tyler, are you seeing any issues with appraisals not coming back high enough? And John, maybe what's your thought on that? We've always heard a market dictates value, and then the appraisal verifies it.
Right. Well, we have a lot of loans out there, so there's always going to be some instances where the value does not necessarily meet expectations. I have not seen that currently out of the norm. But just as John mentioned, and in Lexington, we are definitely feeling the inventory crunch. So we're in a lot of multiple offer situations. Most of the time when we have a value that does not meet expectations, people are aware that that is probably a potential problem. We are not trying to shop for values. We're not trying to, we're very insulated from contact with the appraisers in accordance with guidelines. We use an appraisal management company as we're supposed to do in our industry. So the lender does not have a whole lot of impact on how that appraisal comes in, and it shouldn't be that way, to be honest with you. We do work around that as much as we can. If we have something that comes in a little lower, the first thing that we would probably do is reach out to the expertise of the agents to see if they have some homes that have sold recently that we could maybe use. Second thing that we would look at internally is some of the tools that we have, to see what else is out there. The big thing is, we can't use a listing to put a whole lot of weight towards an appraisal dispute, which John will probably touch on. What I've also seen is maybe a house sells while we're in process. If that house hasn't sold and been completed, the transaction complete by the time we start our application process, we're not able to use that as well. So in increasing value times, it's definitely more of a challenge. I haven't seen that yet. It wouldn't surprise me if we start to see that more. There's always things we can do outside of raising a loan amount. The one thing that people forget sometimes is if you have a willing buyer and a willing seller at a certain price, if the appraisal does not meet the expectations or the purchase price, they can still move forward that transaction in many cases. So if you have a borrower that's putting down 40% and the house appraises, $10,000 less, they can still bring that. What we'll use is we're going to use the lower of the two values, the purchase price or the appraised value. So if the appraised value comes in lower, they want to move forward, we can do that. That'll be their loan to value will be based off of that appraised value. Same thing if they are just putting 20% down. If the borrower, they can either bring more money to the table, or if they want to go ahead and bump that into PMI situation, they can do that. So we have seen that in the past when we have those dramatic increases in price. The customer borrowers I understand that I'm buying a property that may be a little overpriced, but this is the one I want. And the other option is to renegotiate the contract and try to meet somewhere in the middle as well.
Good. John, you got anything to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say, I think you can see why it's so important that I dig into the numbers every day, because I want to be able to convey to my clients that if the property is pushing the envelope, there are reasons behind that, not just because a guy you know, somebody bid up a property, and, you know, we want to be able to understand the fundamentals behind it, that the fact that the supply is down, that there is financial uncertainty. However, average sales prices are continuing to rise. So all of those things on those two charts, those basically are conveyed by us on a daily basis. And if you're not following it and you're just using, you know, a gut check or something you read in the paper, you're not going to be able to convey to your national lenders what's going on here in this specific market. But and I would say on the opposite of that, Lamont, I did a very high-end property here recently, and the seller told me when we were there that he basically cut his losses because of the COVID. And he said, I don't know how many more $1 million buyers we're going to have, but we're going to go ahead and take, you know, 10% less because we want to move on. So he was not waiting around to see what the recovery was. He was letting loose. And then, you know, I've had the examples here recently where, you know, it's very difficult to be an appraiser and argue with a multiple contract situation that the market, that the fundamentals of the market are not coming together. You know, it's you got 8 people bidding for a property, you know, that's supposed to meet the definition of market value, right? The problem is still, you know, the ones that run into the sawmill, or the property that was listed for 9 months and somebody comes along and they bid up the closing cost, and you can tell that it's just a desperation attempt, and those get flushed out pretty easily. But I like to see the commentary from the realtors that they've had multiple offers when I talk to them, because it makes a difference. You know, but I think it can also go both ways. In some of these higher end properties, I've seen it backwards. I will just say, in what I touched on earlier, is the exterior appraisal it's beneficial because you don't have to get in, but it can also penalize somebody who's pushing the market and has elaborate features in their home that you really need to see to appreciate. So, you know, if somebody comes in low on your appraisal and they didn't get in to see it, they might not really even fully appreciate everything that your seller had that the buyer saw when he was in there. I mean, the MLS pictures are great, but some guys still don't take that great of MLS pictures, and they don't, you know, encapsulate every single feature. So the exterior appraisal works, but if I was in a scenario where I had some elaborate features, I would certainly maybe be asking if they would consider doing the regular interior inspection.
Yeah, and I can piggyback on just a little bit. So you can, if you do a desktop appraisal, which is actually just an online appraisal, or if you do an exterior only appraisal, your lender may let you go back and do a full appraisal after that. The problem is, you know, once you have that down on paper, it's sometimes a little more difficult to increase the value within the guidelines. So I'll echo John's comments there. If you think you're pushing it a little bit on the value, I would probably advise your lender, we want to go ahead and do a full appraisal if that's possible. The other thing I wanted to mention that we're seeing a lot more of is property inspection waivers. So Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae have a process where when they pull what's called our automatic underwriting system, they're looking at things like debt to income ratio, they're looking at credit score, time on job. They're going to give us kind of an automatic approval. But one of the other things they look at is that particular property, if it has sold or properties around it have sold within a recent amount of time. They've done Freddie Mac loans, so we had full appraisals on the other properties around it. They can sometimes support the value right out of the gate at the purchase price that we put in the system. So you'll see those property inspection waivers, and we've seen them increase pretty significantly, where we will not have to actually send an appraiser out to the house. They're going to go with the value that we put in initially. A couple tricky points with that, though, that I want to point out. Your buyer may still want that appraisal. They want to make sure that they're not overbuying. The other thing to consider is If something changes throughout the loan process, we have to rerun that automatic underwriting system. So Freddie Mac may be okay with a property inspection waiver for a low risk borrower in a certain situation. They go out, their credit score drops, something happens, we have to rerun automatic underwriting. Now we don't have that property inspection waiver. You could get 20 days down the road, and now we have to go get an appraisal where we could have ordered an appraisal day one. So those are kind of the pitfalls that can come with that, but it's certainly great to save your buyer money and sometimes make the transaction go quicker to use the property inspection waiver.
Good. John May, we do have a question. Will the appraiser accept interior pictures from the seller if he certifies that the pictures are of the subject property?
Well, you know, I can add MLS photos to my appraisal, and I spoke to Lisa about this a few weeks ago about using the realtor's photos in your report as a verification of some features, and they do allow you to do that. But I have not had a seller actually send me anything other than some sideways iPhone pictures that are mediocre in lighting that were actually usable. And you know, that one of the appraisal software vendors now has an app that you can send directly from the appraiser to the seller, or on a refinance to the property owner, and the property owner can then download that app, and it actually validates that the photos were taken in his property, and it does it by using the GIS. And so it sort of makes sure that they're not taking pictures of their neighbor's kitchen and they're taking a picture of their kitchen. But I still say, you know, the exterior appraisal is full of disclaimers that you're not getting in, and an interior inspection might produce a different result. So whether they send you the photos or not, I don't think it's, if I have an elaborate amenity, the photos would help, but you're not going to be able to do what we call a 1004 regular appraisal using the seller's photos to override what the appraiser would have done. You're still only going to be able to use those on an exterior report. So you're still going to be kind of in the same box, but you know, there are some changes going on. And like I said, if I send on a refinance the guy the app and he's savvy enough to use it, the problem is people have varying degrees, just like you know, me, I'm using my wife's iBook here because I don't use a MacBook, and well, I still have to figure it out, Lisa, how to use an iPhone and all that stuff. But you know, refinancing and taking the photos, MLS is still the best source because it obviously has some accuracy, but they won't let you throw the seller's photos in there and just call it a 1004 and move on with it. It's still going to be a drive-by.
Gotcha. So Vince Tyra sent me a message. He is on another call for a publicly held company board meeting, and they are voting. And he says he feels awful. He owes us big, and his loss. I was going to show him this. See, I was ready for him. See, I did that, John. I'll show you how to do that someday. All right, so we'll get him on another call. Lisa, let me ask you a question. With all of the educational requirements for realtors, post-license education and continuing ed and all that, are you all able to keep up with your online training offerings, or what's that going to look like going down the road?
Yes, so we have always offered online education, and so some of our members are obviously taking care of that. But we have started transition to Zoom classes. So we're launching our first couple of Zoom classes and are moving all of them that way. And then, of course, the Kentucky Real Estate Commission did give some leniency to those that need their post-licensure education. So they have an extension until after this crisis is over. So
good. All right. Well, so we're coming to an end here. Just one of my good friends, Al Blevins, who is a UK fan, said free lower level arena tickets for everyone on this call from Vince Tyra. So we'll work on that. And then
can I raise my hand? I got one more quick question.
Yeah, absolutely.
One more comment, and that was from residential landlords that I've heard from. They put a freeze on any of the court activities until June or July. So anybody that has a slow paying tenant is looking at August or September to get anything going. And I know it's kind of a sensitive thing, but it is something that residential property owners have been dealing with, and how to rent vacant homes, and whether they're following the same protocol, where they're sitting out in the driveway and letting the prospective tenant go in the house. They're trying to follow that. But a very creative landlord that we all know has been going out of his way to reach out to his tenants to apply for a lot of these programs. The city had a program, a lot of churches have programs. There's about 6 or 8 programs to help tenants who get behind because of the economic uncertainty, to stay ahead on their rent so that they don't end up losing it sometime in July or August, whenever they open the courts. But a lot of the real estate lawyers that handle the foreclosures that are working for these guys, you're treading on soft ground. But if you can do something to help your tenant get his payments, then it's going to be a win for both the landlord and the tenant. So the programs are still out there, and guys are telling me that in April and May they were still getting rental assistance checks from the city agencies. So I wanted just to throw that out there. I had a question earlier about, if you're doing the income approach, how can you forecast the income if you have somebody that can't stay and you don't have access to the house for 3-4 months. And on the CARES Act, if the landlord has a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan, you can't charge late fees. So you're stuck there until midsummer, late summer, and that could put you in a hurt. So instead of making that a negative, they try to turn it into a positive by getting the state and city agencies to help out some of the tenants. I just want to throw that out there.
Good. Well, I have a surprise guest. Vince Tyra, are you with us?
I am.
Hey, how's it going, sir?
I'm late. Sorry, I was on another board meeting, a public company board meeting, so I was running way behind.
Actually, it worked out perfect. We were just kind of finished with our real estate segment, and so now we can put all our attention on you. And you're not going to have to. One of our UK friends from out in the States said you're going to owe us lower level arena seats if you don't show up. So now you're all up.
Glad I could get on then.
Yeah. Well, so welcome. Yeah. So let me ask you, I've got a few questions here that I wanted to run past you. One of our guests last week was a retired U.S. Army colonel by the name of Mark Irwin. He transitioned from a 27-year career as a Delta Force member and ultimately Chief of Staff of U.S. Special Ops Command. And then he went on to become a business leader, and now he's CEO of the Bardstown Bourbon Company. So just curious, given your background as a business leader and just all that you've done in that arena, what was it that made you think you could pull this off, as you have as U of L's athletic director?
Well, I think that, the one thing I'd say is, like, I always believe leadership is transferable, and that, either you have it in your belly or not to be able to take on tough circumstances. And I think, having been through some, turnarounds and different things in my life, through different scenarios, recessions and changes in commodity pricings, been on different boards and companies. It's been helpful for dealing with what we've dealt with in Louisville over the last 2.5+ years that I've been there. But, we have a lot of the same things. There's finance and accounting, there's marketing, there's sales, there's HR and legal, the same, basics that you're going to have. It's just you're supporting an athletic program instead of a traditional business, a manufacturing or distribution business. But it still takes the right guidance and leadership to step in and sort it out. And if you can deal with people and you're fearless about making the right decisions in circumstances like this, you can still fare well. And I certainly didn't know how long I was going to stay in this role. I think initially, maybe it was going to be a quick 90 to 180 day stop was what I was originally committed to just try to stem things off and then bridge us to a traditional athletic director. And, what's amazing to me is at the time, I certainly thought it may be a year before the FBI allegations ever turned into anything with the NCAA. I just didn't expect it was going to be 2 years and 8 months. And probably another 12 to 18 months left on this thing. So it's a long process. But in between, we've shored up our business model in a lot of ways. And we, frankly, just focused a lot on our constituents, whether they be the fans and donors, certainly the community. We've been heavily involved. We're highly engaged with the academic side of campus. Employees, we've put through a lot of training and culture training and things like that, which I believe you can, embed those kind of values in people. So we've developed goals and values that we make decisions upon. And when people make big decisions, they have to reference which goals and values they used to determine the best outcome. And then, I'll say the last one is probably the first one, and that's just the student athletes that, we want them to have the best experience they can while they're there. And that's the reason we are here in these roles. So, I don't know, you never really know the cards you're going to be dealt when you take over any new opportunity, but it's a test of your leadership and how you deal with it. And hopefully we dealt with it well. Absolutely.
So speaking of processes, this COVID-19 pandemic, definitely a process, not an event. At what point did you realize the severity of the pandemic and how it would affect not just Louisville athletics, but college athletics throughout the country?
Yeah, probably right away, to be honest, and not being silly. We obviously got the notice on March 12th when we were in Greensboro for the ACC men's basketball tournament. And, it was that weekend. We flew home, and that weekend we started our planning in the athletic department. And, having been through dire situations, in my past, as I say, in the business side of it, you can't take any of them too lightly. So you almost over prepare. And in this environment, athletics has pretty much been immune from, much economic pressure historically. And I think that what we did was, I'll say leading edge to give us an attaboy, because I've led roundtables for Division I athletic directors. We've shared our materials that we've used and our financial planning models on what we've used with all the other Division I athletic directors. I've worked with Oregon, Washington, Texas, UT San Antonio, West Virginia, I'll say most of the Power 5 schools, and particularly in the ACC, and even Cincinnati yesterday and Western Kentucky before that, sharing all the things that we developed. But a lot of it is tools that I've had in my past that we brought forward. So, in taking the job, I was certainly behind the curve on what an AD does on a day-to-day basis. But we've been leading edge in terms of sharing how to go about this from a business standpoint on how to, right our ship as best we can, and then helping others get through it too.
That's so cool that you guys could do that. Who would have thought that years ago, that rival schools could come together and share best practices? That's great.
Yeah, it's happening more now than ever.
In every industry. In your press conference yesterday, I heard you using words and phrases like holding pattern and speculation and that type of thing regarding the football season. That's got to be frustrating, not just for you, but also for your coaches, your staff, and players, and that type of thing. As a leader, how do you relay a consistent, positive, yet accurate message to them?
Yeah, the last word you use there, accurate, is the difficult one in these times. But, certainly you can be positive. I'm an optimist by trade. So what we do is we work hard on what we can control rather than being a victim of circumstances and allowing that to make us lazy. So, there's an old phrase that if it weren't for deadlines, nothing would ever get done. So I'm pretty good about setting deadlines on what we want to get done. And so we make the assumption right now that let's assume we're going to have a certain amount of our student athletes back on campus June 1. What are the processes that we have to have in place and work with infectious disease and research and so forth to make sure that we're going to have a safe environment when those student athletes are, back on campus. And that creates a lot of process. And again, I would like to, give a attaboy to our team. And in doing that, we've turned over our documents to the ACC, and they're using our documents to lead. So Commissioner Swafford's been great about recognizing our leadership, because both on the financial front and on this particular issue, the COVID, on, how to respond and how you get the student athletes back on campus. But in doing that, I talked to Chris Mack last night and Coach Walls last night and the women's basketball, and they're upbeat. They feel like we're ahead of it. They trust that what we're doing when they're on the calls with their peers that Louisville's leading, and they're telling their peers what we're doing. It makes them feel good too. So I think part of it is just like you guys are coming together, solving problems. We're doing the same, but fortunately we feel like we're on the front end of it.
Another word I heard you say a lot yesterday was prepare. And then I was on a conference call or a training call earlier today, and I heard a quote by John Wooden. It's when opportunity knocks, it's too late to prepare. And I thought that was pretty good. I know in our industry, folks are getting a bit discouraged, not just because their business is down, but just the total effect it's having on their families and just everyday life. How do you motivate your people to stay ready and prepare for game day?
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly right. You tend to pull things forward. There's enough to work on with all the changing legislation that's going on in the conference and the NCAA and how we educate our coaches and our student athletes on that. But the preparation is the key. And I think that anything, even though today got delayed, which is a stinker because of this board thing, I was prepared to get on today. On what the topic was and talking about leadership and things like that. Certainly know some of the environment as I got on. I think it was John was talking, but I had to think about your world and my life too. I happen to have tenants, and the first thing I did in March was call one of my tenants who I knew was going to have a tough time with the restaurants and said, I'm going to give you some time off on your rent here. I've got some commercial real estate, same thing. Restaurant real estate that I own, and I had to go deal with them up in Indiana, and then here in Kentucky, had some commercial real estate. So much like you guys are doing that, I had to do that in my other part of my life, as well as what we're doing in the athletic department.
So looking at your resume, you've had a lot of success, both as an athlete, baseball player for the Cats, business person, and now as an AD. I don't think I know any successful folks that haven't experienced some failure. You touched on it maybe a little bit when you got on, but has failure played any part in your success?
Oh, God, I could tell you about the stinkers. I mean, I'll tell you about the good stuff for sure. But, I tell this to the athletes a lot because they're always enamored with somebody who's left sports and then gets in business and does well. And, obviously they're always thinking about the money side of it. But the lessons learned are terrific. And I tell them negative learning is exponential learning. So not every deal that I've gotten into has been perfect. It's just, but I've done a lot of them, and more of them good than bad. But there are things you learn, and particularly those learnings I would say have worked here because, I've taken recessions or signs in the past as like, oh, I'll wait for it to go away, or, I'm late to address it. And then, you can get yourself believing that someone else is going to, you'll learn from their mistakes and then follow on, not knowing you're the one making the mistakes. But I'm definitely quick on the trigger to prepare and do things like this. I've been in commodity industries. Frankly, the phone call I was just on, a public company was involved in metals, and you can imagine what happens in metal commodity. Prices go up and down quite a bit. So you're doing a lot of planning in that environment. You can't over prepare. And I think that the deals that I've been in, I used to be an investor in one of the biggest coal fire burning plant. We would do all the scrubbers for those. And I mean, we were rocking and rolling in Canada and the US. And then a fella named Barack Obama came along and just mentioned along the campaign trail that he was going to modify the EPA standards, which in fairness probably needed to be. But what that did was all the coal fire burning plants stopped. And you all can appreciate why probably now all this happened since, but we didn't, back in the day, we didn't see that. And that industry went kaputs. I mean, we literally, didn't pay attention to it enough, what was trending. And then rightfully so, when Barack was challenging what was going on, it shut down the industry. And we took our lumps in a big way on that one and sold off pieces in the end. So it was the best in the portfolio, and it went out the worst.
As we close out here, a couple of observations. One is, I don't want to get you in trouble, but looks like you and President Bendaputi have a pretty good relationship.
Yeah, no, Neely and I get along great. She's she's a great marketing mind and does a good job and keeping people upbeat and focused. She's brought in a couple nice talents around her. Michael Wade Smith is really talented as our chief of staff. And I think she's focused on the right things. She did a wonderful job in trying to navigate a very difficult situation with U of L Health. I'm certainly appreciative that she lets me, because of my business background, I get to play two roles there with her. I get to be the AD, but also I sit on the president's cabinet, the executive cabinet. I'm on design benefits for the employees. I'm on the retiree benefits program for that. I'm on the overall university budget and finance. I'm leading her cardinal principles. I could tell you all these committees that Title IX. So she's put me on probably too many, but a number of initiatives where she knows I can go in, add value, and then get out of the way. It's more about just going in. Again, as I noted at my opening comments, I do believe that leadership is transferable, and I do believe that having that optimism is a competitive advantage. And I've always felt in athletics and in business that if it's a tie and you feel better about the circumstances than your competitor, you're going to win. And I really do believe that having that kind of mentality, like I carry forward, and I'd like to believe Neely does, has been really helpful on campus.
Our special ops guy, Colonel Irwin, the other day said, as a leader, he thinks one of the most important things is for your people to see you, for you to be visible. And I was going through the list of sports at U of L, and looks like you're everywhere. But how does that work out? I mean, you got women's softball, soccer, tennis, swimming, everything. That must be overwhelming at times.
It is, but again, it goes back to what we talked about, preparing. I mean, I literally have to look at my calendar months out, knowing I can't be at every event, but I know which ones are important, the bigger ones to them. Certainly know I want to be there for senior day. I try to attend some of their other events and play a role in celebrating them as much as we can. So I'll travel with women's basketball, try to catch a baseball, go to the softball. I'm in the natatorium, which is awfully hot in there, but I try to hit them all, and they know that. Field hockey, and I think they appreciate it, that visibility. I know our coaches do, and it allows me to develop a relationship with them outside the office, because I can see them in their norm. I can see them when their passion and how much they want to win and how much they care about their players and on the academic side. But I generally go down to the Thornton Academic Center and have lunch with our student athletes as well, which, a lot of times I'm the only administrator down there, but I go sit, grab 6 or 8 of them. We just talk what's going on in their life and get a sense of, the day in the life of a college athlete.
Good. 2 last questions. We'll let you go.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to get too political here, but I'm just reading it. Anything, taking the politics out of it, anything that you could like to see differently, maybe on the way the state is handling its response to COVID-19 and reopening and all that business?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I've yet to see a state follow the federal guidelines. I think when Fauci came out, right or wrong, and the government came out and provided federal guidance, which I was paying close attention to related to athletics, and this notion of 14 days of trending downwards in cases and deaths, I think everybody blew past that because of societal pressure and economic pressure. And I think that's been a difficult one for every governor to balance, and particularly Governor Beshear, noting that our neighbor states are being more aggressive and opening up. My view maybe is different than most. I'm certainly cautious. If I go somewhere, which I'm not in many places, but I do have the mask. And, even I went to the lawnmower repair to drop off stuff in the weekend, and I walk in with it on, and, obviously they don't have it on, but I said, I'm going to wear mine unless I'll stand back or whatever. But, some people are more cognizant of it than others. You go other places, everybody's masked up and offended if you don't. But In the end, this thing's a difficult one to solve. And I've sat with Kevin Gardner, John Klein, in our research infectious disease. And, you know, I don't want to spook anybody, but there's a chance that this thing's going to get a sniff of all of us at some point, hopefully no magnitude by the time the things are being developed. But it's a difficult one for sure. And it does seem like it's, you know, even fast tracking through the FDA, it still seems like it's about a year out for a vaccine and solve from what we're hearing, even on campus. And we're one of the leaders in the country on it. So, you know, I think, you know, all I really want is consistency. I think if I was in the business world, which I guess I still am to some degree, you know, you want consistency from your government officials. And I think that's what I'm trying to look for. Now we're hitting more adverse times. It's easy to be on the front end and everybody do the same and say, stay safe. But now we're getting into tough decisions. And I think that's my only request from Andy is just consistency on where he's been and trying to be that way on the way out of this. Good.
Last question. Leadership role models. Anybody that's helped you along the way that come to mind?
You know, it's, you know, mentors are great. And I try to partner our student athletes up with them in the community. You know, it's funny. And I was in healthcare, you know, right out of college, and a guy named Zeph Ross was somebody that I was with Humana down in West Palm Beach, and he was terrific. I mean, really taught me a lot at a young age. And then when I got my entrepreneur blood flowing, Mike Mountjoy, who's local accountant, some may know, ran into Mike, and you know, I was the marketing, you know, whiz and creative guy and entrepreneur when I came back to Louisville from West Palm, and he and I were partners in a business with another guy, and I learned so much from him. I knew how to sell and grow a business and do all those things and treat people well and lead, but I didn't understand as well as I should, you know, the cash flows and all that. We were in a distribution business, and Mike became really critical to me, and we learned a lot from each other over the years. Ironically, we've now invested in probably 15 businesses together and have a few together today. You know, and that was when I was 26. I'm now 54. So 28 years of doing this with him, and we've had great success, frankly, along the way. But he was a terrific, you know, one from that matched my shortcomings.
Yeah.
At a great time in my life.
Good. Sounds like you surround yourself with the right people. So do you have any questions of us? Not that you would know what to ask, because I mean, we hit you hard on this quick, so we appreciate you responding to us. But you know, Kentucky Realtors, we've got, I guess, over 12,000 realtors across the state, and we are, you know, just like you, we're right in the middle of it and trying to figure it out every day and just add value to our members and that type of thing. So.
Well, you know, Lamont, I'm closing on a house myself. We're closing in next week, so I'm trying to help this space. We close on I think Tuesday.
Congratulations.
Here and on another one, so maybe I'm helping them a little bit. But in the other side of it, you know, certainly I've asked a number of people how they're handling their tenants on the rental side and on the commercial side, because I owned a number of 19 McAllister delis up in Indianapolis, and still own a couple of the retail that I lease back. And, you know, just thinking about, I'm comparing notes just like you guys are with how they're handling their tenants, and then on the residential side.
It kind of sounds like just being preemptive is kind of the way to go, and reach out to your tenants before they don't reach out to you and it's too late. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Well, I can see that even in not just homes, but in autos. I think we learned a lot from 08 and 09 about we let people suffer too long. And I know that there's some feelings about what Washington's doing to subsidize what's going on right now. But I'm telling you, if you go the other path and you let people go down on their car loans and their rent and their mortgages and all that, the recovery is much longer. I think that's one thing we learned, that if their credit scores go down and all that's going on, longer term, you're causing more damage financially to the economy than what we're doing now. And that's, you know, you can agree or disagree with that, but just I'm pretty clear on why that's happening. Maybe all the nuances I wouldn't totally agree with, but I think directionally it's the right thing to do, because if not, it's going to be a longer recovery.
Good. Well, Vince, I'm going to just say thank you for being with us. I know how busy you are, and we just appreciate you sharing your insights with us. And tell Lori that my wife, Stacy Breland, says hi. They used to
Will
work
do.
together at UPS 100 years ago.
Very good.
Don't tell her I said 100 years ago. A few years ago. I'm going to turn it back to our president, Lester Sanders now. Lester?
All right.
Thank you, Lamont.
Thank
And Vince, thank you so much for being with us today. And we wish you well, certainly. We wish the Cards well, and the kids especially, that you're working and you're just teaching how to grow up to be good, productive citizens. So we don't take lightly the work that you do in the community either. But you didn't have to get back on this call or get on this call. You could have said, hey, Lester, hey, Lamont, as we were texting back and forth and emailing back and forth in the middle of that meeting. But you did. You took the time to get on, and we certainly appreciate that.
Well, I was stressing out. Certainly had an obligation to you guys and everyone on here. And, when I didn't realize we were going to, don't want to get you too involved in it, but it was a public company that we sold, and there were some board resolutions that they held out at the end, and they just kept asking a lot of questions. So it took a lot longer than I intended to get to you guys, but I'm glad I got a chance to.
Well, we appreciate it. And the big word for me today that you left was optimism. And I'm one that's an eternal optimist, but I certainly appreciate the optimism word that you gave us to take with us so that we continue to work and see our way through this pandemic. And I'd be a little bit remiss if I didn't say, please tell Justin Ruffin, thank you so very much.
I will. He's terrific. He's terrific.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate you so much.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.